Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining. We're just allowing participants in now, and we'll be starting the webinar in a minute or two. You'll see that we've got a lot of people joining. I think as we've got a relatively short amount of time and lots of interesting stuff to get through, let's get started. So welcome everybody to this workshop on electricity market design. It's fantastic to see so many people connected today. I know that we've got people joining from North and South America, right across the world, all the way across to Australia. So thank you, everybody, for making time in your schedules, especially those of you who are up early in the morning or late at night. So my name is Andy Flagg, and I'm the coordinator of the Regulatory Energy Transition Accelerator, or RETA. And RETA is a global platform for energy regulators to collaborate on decarbonisation. Most of the participants today come from energy regulators, but the workshop is also open to other stakeholders. And one of our partners at RETA is the World Bank. They're a founding organisation of RETA and a permanent member of our steering committee. The ESMAP programme of the World Bank proposed this work stream on market design and carbon pricing. It fits under RETA's goal of creating regulatory frameworks for the energy transition, and it really answers one of the key concerns that we've been hearing from energy regulators about the big challenges that they're facing with decarbonisation. So for those energy systems which have been liberalised markets for a long time, regulators are questioning whether the existing market structures are fit for purpose as we move to a very high penetration of variable renewable energy sources. And for those systems currently moving to liberalised markets, they're wondering if they should follow the existing models from around the world or move directly into something else more compatible with the ambition to move away from fossil fuels. So today we're going to hear from two experts at the ESMAP programme of the World Bank. So firstly, to introduce ESMAP. ESMAP stands for the Energy Sector Management Assistance Programme, which is a partnership between the World Bank and over 20 partners to help low and middle income countries reduce poverty and boost growth through sustainable energy solutions. ESMAP's Energy Markets Connectivity and Regional Trade Initiative, or MARCOT, supports a comprehensive effort by the World Bank and client countries in designing and implementing energy sector reforms. This primarily focuses on establishing competitive and transparent national and regional electricity trading markets, increasing interconnectivity across regions, and scaling up regional electricity trade. And MARCOT has conducted a series of analyses to explore market design issues with this core question. Is the design of the existing wholesale electricity market robust and compatible with carbon reduction policies? Essentially, can the current regime deliver a decarbonised power system, or do we need to adjust some market features or add new mechanisms? So in this webinar, the team will present the key finding from these analyses. We have two speakers, Deb Chattopadhyay, a senior energy specialist at ESMAP and the lead of the MARCOT initiative, and Adam Suski, a consultant at ESMAP. They will each give a 30-minute presentation. And then we're going to have a Q&A session. And this is really important because ESMAP and RETA will continue to explore electricity markets and the energy transition. And today's discussion will help us in shaping future research areas. So there's going to be 4 ways to get involved. The first way will be to write a question using the Q&A function in Zoom, which you can do while Deb and Adam are speaking. The second way will be to raise your virtual hand during the Q&A session at the end. And the third will be to fill in the survey after the webinar. Naoki has already posted the link in the chat for that. And the fourth way is for RETA members to continue this conversation on the RETA Knowledge Hub. So Naoki from the World Bank posted about this webinar on the Knowledge Hub already. So feel free to add your comments there and we can continue this discussion. We'll be recording this session and we hope to make it available on the Knowledge Hub along with the slides that will be presented. And we'll also share that out with everybody who's signed up today. So please do get involved. But first, let's get into our first presentation from Deb. So Deb, handing over to you.
Thanks. Thank you, Andy, and welcome everyone to this presentation. So hopefully you can all see the presentation. So I'll sort of give a very quick background to this particular work. So this is, as you can see, there are two parts to the title. One is the design of wholesale electricity market, and we will actually mainly focus on the spot market design part, and the other part is energy transition. Now, if you ask me actually whether the two topics connect well or not, that in itself is an interesting question. I was in great disbelief myself when we started this work. But we'll get to that. But before that, I just wanted to point out that the design of wholesale electricity market, especially the spot market, is in itself a very important topic for us as the World Bank, because we operate in the developing world. And only 1 in 5 countries that we work in has any form of market. And that includes everything from good to bad to ugly. And if we are talking about bid-based spot market, we are down to maybe 5. So there's a lot of work, and the genesis of this work was really to find a way to test alternative market design. And then the energy transition component was added on because it was actually an interesting question whether the incumbent market design, they need to change or not. So here is the sort of key question that Andy already mentioned. So the question is the design of existing wholesale markets robust enough and compatible with carbon reduction policies? And those red fonts underlined is not a change mark. That's deliberately there because there are different market design options. And the definition of robust or resource adequacy or whatever we want to call it is a key part of that, because as we move into a high sort of wind solar regime, then the definition of robustness changes. Well, wind, solar, and hydro as well. So here are sort of 3 key questions that we are trying to answer. About the 3 options. Is the status quo good enough? So if we have an energy only market or some other form of market, can it actually deliver a decarbonized power system? Are there sort of adjustments needed to the existing features of a market, and in particular whether the market needs ancillary services market, which is of course there in several parts of the world? Or do we need a paradigm shift to long-term contracts, which essentially in one way or other sort of abandons or reduces the role of spot market significantly? And then there are like views also whether we need to actually rethink about the marginal cost-based pricing itself. So there are pretty serious questions around that. And one thing that sort of struck us is that people have given plenty of opinions, and the opinions range from point 1 to point 3. So some people say that the current market design is fine. Others say that, no, we need actually a long-term contract market. But then what we did not see is that much is kind of an empirical investigation. So that's kind of like where the motivation of our work came from, to actually go and test whether markets will actually survive under a sort of a deep carbon cut regime. There are some important subtexts to those questions. So there are firstly different market design options, and we picked up the 4 main flavors: energy only EO, energy only with frequency control ancillary services, which is there in markets like Australia, for example. Then we have capacity and energy market. Then if we combine all 3 commodities that are traded in the market, capacity, energy, and ancillary services, that's another popular regime. So these are kind of like the incumbent market designs that are there in different parts of the world. The first question can be broken down into, like whether one of these market design options perform better than others in a carbon constrained world. So how do we actually test that? We could actually check whether prices go up significantly in one regime like energy only compared to others. And does it actually go up and down a lot? In other words, whether the volatility increase is significant rather than just the mean. Would there be actually room for excessive market power? For example, if wind stops blowing, does the thermal counterpart then actually get a highly concentrated market, and they can actually use a lot of market power? That sort of issues. Does the system become unreliable? So the fact that the system will get power mostly from wind, solar, and hydro wherever that is an option, and we look at a case study around that, whether that actually exposes the system to greater sort of reliability risks. And that sort of last question is also an extension of that particular point on reliability. What kind of system security risks do we want the market design to cover? So is it like, are we going to live in a standard N-1 world, which was meant for a predominantly thermal system? Do we actually want to account for fast-acting VRE related risk, which might exceed the N-1 standard? Do we actually want to look at more sort of slow-acting, but even bigger risks like wind or hydro droughts? So these are some of the things that we explore through our empirical analysis. What we're going to do today is to actually test some of this popular market design, whether they are vulnerable to price risk or price volatility risk, market power risk, security risk, etc., under a carbon constraint. And then we look at a couple of case studies that we have conducted. So we'll talk a lot more about that in about half an hour. And then, we are very interested to actually get your views on the methodology and the findings. And, we know that there are quite a few regulators around the world. There are other sort of academics, researchers, and other organizations, probably from the system operators around the world, etc. It'll be good to actually get your unfiltered views on what you think about this work, because this has been so far a relatively solo journey by just 2 of us, Adam and myself. The work has been fully implemented by Adam, who will be the main presenter today, and so this is a very sort of a low-key, small-scale effort to answer extremely difficult questions. And I know that, there are many of you in the audience who are working on similar things. So this will also be a good opportunity to start the discussion. I don't think we'll have enough time to go into extensive discussions. But again, we are looking for feedback on the work, on the framework itself, as well as potential case studies that you may be interested for us to actually look at. Or these models, etc., that we have developed is also available. So we'll come back to that towards the end of the discussion today. let me quickly walk you through the core part of the methodology, and then Adam will actually give you more specific implementation details related to individual case studies, which differ a little bit across the case studies in terms of what we do. One nice thing about this, what we are calling Market Design Lab, is that it's a modular structure. So we can actually add different components like capacity and frequency control ancillary services to the model. And we essentially have 1, 2, or 3 commodities, the capacity, energy, and ancillary services with their demand curves. So on the right-hand side, you can see the block diagram. That's essentially the key component is those demand curves. Because we are actually in a world where we are not actually solving a standard dispatch problem. We are solving a gaming problem. So that's the second block you see on the right-hand side. So we are using a multi-year Kuno model to co-optimize capacity dispatch and frequency control ancillary services, or FCAS, using a nonlinear programming model. So that's kind of the core model that we are using. What it does is that it basically allows us to shift away from a standard cost-based bidding that's inherent in any dispatch or least cost planning model. So we basically let the participants or players or generation companies in a market choose their bid and take advantage wherever they can in terms of bidding above their cost. Whether they're doing that to recover their fixed cost or using market power, it's a bit of a gray area. But basically, the Kuno model allows you to capture that sort of bidding behavior. So that, which is why we are using it, because the market in any form, even in the current form, that's one of the biggest challenges. If we have a concentrated market, and if we look at some of the markets like Ukraine and so on, we essentially have only a couple of players. Same thing in Georgia, which is the other case study. So the other, the third component is, which you saw on the left-hand side, the third bullet point, is that this particular Kuno model in itself is not sufficient, because this is kind of an equilibrium model which tells you something about the aspirations of participants to withhold significant capacity in some cases. So that needs to be augmented with sort of a bid preparation heuristic, which is basically how these players will participate in a market clearing engine to clear those bids, then the capacity expansion, reliability simulation. So this is this Kuno model is sort of one component of many other modules that are kind of needed. And in the end, you can see in the last, on the third sort of block, that the outcome of this model is that we get spot prices, capacity, and dispatch outcomes. Very quickly, I'll go through the construct of the core model. So as I said, this is a Kuno model. So first, I'll talk a little bit about the energy-only market version. And what this model does is that it has a lot of similarities with a dispatch model. So we have an objective function, which is to maximize the social welfare. Then we have a bunch of constraints. The second one that you see is essentially a demand-supply balance. And then we have the capacity on variable X, which is the generation, and a transfer limitation, or the transfer capability limits on the flow variables, or F. So it looks very much like a dispatch model. That's what a market clearing engine will also do. The big difference is that this particular problem here is actually solved for individual players. So it's a profit maximizing problem for individual players. And this formulation allows us to actually still solve it as a single optimization problem, which is a nice feature of this. This particular formulation was developed a long time ago in the 1950s by Professor Paul Samuelson. So this is an adaptation of that particular model for power systems. So that was kind of like sorry, just going back for a second. So this is only with the generation X, and then the Y variables that you see is essentially the net injection. What we can do is then we can actually extend this particular model to have additional commodities. So we can actually add a capacity market. So just like we have an energy related demand curve, we can actually have PE for energy demand curve. And we can add another component in the objective function, PC, for the capacity market. And likewise, we can actually also then have an ancillary services demand curve. Now, this particular model will need to be calibrated very carefully against observed dispatch prices to get the demand curve parameters, which is one of the key challenges with using one of these models. So if you're asking me to actually implement the model for another market, the biggest time we'll actually spend is in terms of calibrating those demand curve parameters. But I wanted to show you, give you a sort of a flavor of what the models look like. So this is basically the Kuno part, which is the main component that we are using. As I mentioned, it will be augmented with other tools like a capacity expansion model. We have also used a reliability simulation model in one case. We'll talk about that in a bit. In terms of the analysis, what we have done is to actually look at alternative scenarios around carbon limits and how these sort of four main paradigms, energy only, energy plus ancillary services, energy plus capacity market, and then all three, energy plus AS plus CM, how these particular four design paradigms perform under carbon constraint and also under extreme scenarios like very high or low hydro, which is one of the main case studies for Georgia in Eastern Europe that we have used. And then we kind of like look at the performance of the market in terms of how much capacity comes in, what does the dispatch look like? Do we actually get the least cost dispatch or not? Do we have sufficient reserve margin, which is sort of one indicator of reliability. We also look at expected unserved energy in some cases, and then the commodity price outcomes, whether they are close to the competitive outcome or not. We have different ways to sort of test it by essentially, if I go back to the model formulation, if I look at the last term, that's essentially the social welfare loss from market power. If we drop that particular component, what we get is a perfectly competitive outcome. And that's something we can actually calibrate the model against as a performance indicator. Or if we actually assume a case where we have lots and lots of market players, then the Kuno model itself naturally goes to the fully competitive equilibrium or perfectly competitive equilibrium. So basically, like the second bullet point is giving us a bunch of indicators against which we can test the performance of the market. Then, like the real test is that we actually try to find some empirical evidence of whether one design performs substantially better than others across a range of scenarios. And again, I think the reason we are interested in is that these questions, as you can imagine, are extremely important. We are sort of going through the energy transition into, like uncharted territory. We are looking at sometimes highly concentrated markets that are becoming even more concentrated with very large solar and wind farms coming in or a big hydro. So we are actually talking about starting markets in some of these very, very small systems like Georgia. So what happens if we actually do allow that to go ahead? And are we actually looking at a market regime that will actually support solar and wind and hydro to come in, or will it actually backfire in some sense? So these were like some of the things that we are trying to answer for Ukraine before the war started. We were actually looking at that market quite closely, and also for Georgia. Just to again reiterate the point that even before we look at decarbonization type of issues, these analyses were very, very useful to actually answer other questions, like whether in the near term, before it becomes inundated with solar and wind, whether there will be market power issues, which was a big question in Ukraine. The market had started, and we were essentially testing whether the prices were efficient or not. And similarly for Georgia also, our support was initially to test the market design they're planning to introduce. And the introduction of the wholesale market has been delayed there for various reasons, but one of them was that some of the analysis we were doing, it was actually opening up some of the questions around market power, price, what kind of price cap will be useful. There's no point in starting a market and then keep dropping the price cap to manage market power, which has happened in some of the other jurisdictions. So that's kind of like the second bullet point. We are also looking at things like whether an FCAS market, the ancillary services market or capacity market, will be useful to deal with RE variability. So this is a sort of a, as I said, it's a kind of a nice laboratory setting. In a very cheap way, we can actually try to find at least approximate answers to some of those questions. And a related question is also like whether storage will be useful. And this was a big issue for Ukraine's integration with the NSOE market. And in fact, the bank was funding one of the big sort of battery storage project. Now, of course, unfortunately, this has all been on hold since then, but then we were able to get some interesting results in terms of how the battery could be useful in providing ancillary services, which is key for the NSOE integration. And as I mentioned already, the price cap, which is a big issue in several markets, including Georgia, whether, like how do you actually balance the price cap being too high, exposing the market to market power risks versus setting it very low. And we have like the Indian market where the price cap has been lowered from about $250 per megawatt hour, which was already a low number, down to 10 rupees, which is about half of that, or $125 per megawatt hour. Is it actually going to choke picking investments? That's a big question. So I think it's time for me to actually hand it over to Adam, who actually did all of the work. So over to you, Adam, to take the audience through the case studies.
Thank you, Deb. Let me share my screen. Right. So thank you everyone for coming. So my name is Adam Suski. I've been a consultant in ESMAP for over 3 years. I've been working primarily with the various modeling-related tasks to power system planning, but also to markets modeling. I have a background in power engineering, hold a master's in sustainable energy from Technical University of Denmark, and I'm currently working also towards a PhD at Imperial College in working on the market designs for long duration energy storage. So my presentation will be right continuation of what Deb kind of laid out on a little bit conceptually. I will go through some of the most interesting results related to the case study that we conducted in order to test some of these hypotheses as well as test the methodologies that we developed. And as Deb mentioned, the first one was Georgia. So I think it is useful first to kind of describe a little bit or give you a little bit of information about Georgia specifically. So we started working on this project in late 2022. Initially, in order to support some of the fiscal related questions that the Ministry of Finance had to us, and later on, it moved a little bit towards the decarbonization questions that Deb was talking about, and about how the market can drive the decarbonization and what designs could be most suitable. So why we are working in Georgia is because Georgia recently joined the Energy Community, and the Energy Community is an international organization that consists of European Union and number of non-European Union countries. and it extends, it aims to extend the internal energy market of European Union to the wider Europe, primarily towards southeastern Europe. So consequently, Georgia is obliged or required to reform its power sector to comply with so-called third energy package and achieve the deregulated electricity market. So it's been working on opening its wholesale electricity markets for quite a while. Unfortunately, the market opening has been multiple times postponed, and most recently from July 1st, 2023. So before we, so right at the time when we were working on it, to July 1st, 2024. And in terms of some sort of techno-economic characteristics of the country, is a relatively small country, hydro-dominated. The total capacity is just above 4 gigawatts, 4.5 gigawatts, and most of that includes hydropower with just around a gigawatt of various types of thermal power plants, primarily gas run. Another important characteristic is that the import actually consists quite a large share of the supply. It was around 10% in 2022. But the problem is that that this value is vary quite significantly towards the around the year. So you can see the hydro supply of Georgia in some sort of average meteorological year. So the darker part is the storage reservoir hydro, while the lighter blue is the run-of-river hydros. And you can see that in the middle of the year, for around 1/3 of the year, the supply is the supply from hydro can completely fulfill the demand. However, in the winter, when the demand is a little bit higher, part of it would have to be supplied either by the thermal generators, and that covers around another 1/3 of the year, so that thermal power plants and hydros can fulfill the demand. But for around 1/3 of the year, the imports has to come in, and usually they are the marginal generators in Georgia. So in terms of the kind of strategic long-term challenges that were driving a little bit our work were two. So first one was that Georgia tries to improve its security of supply because of this high dependence on the import, and also because of uncertainties related to the hydro production, which can vary depending on the type of hydrological year by around plus or minus 20%, which in such a hydro-dominated country is quite significant. And the second one was Georgia is a developing country, so the demand is growing quite significantly. And the challenge, as in other countries, is to meet this demand with sustainable energy, especially that it tries to have a deeper integration with the European Union. And in terms of the market, or the wholesale market, there are two really interesting, very classical reform features that we've been seeing in Georgia. The first one was that majority in the non-market environment currently, most of the generation is subjected to different forms of the long-term contracts. In terms of hydro, which dominates the market, these contracts are called public service obligation. So one challenge that Georgia and other similar markets actually have is to move from these long-term contracts towards the more market exposure to, for example, spot prices or some other more market-based kinds of contracts. So the Georgia is actually trying to switch from these PSOs towards the at least partial exposure to the contracts for differences. And you can see on this chart on the left, this is from the report that Bank did. It's called Rethinking Power Sector Reform, that for the developing countries that started some of the form of the wholesale market, this is actually a big challenge. So for most of their history, the level of contract market share was quite high and didn't really go down. Another characteristic is the market power concern, and it's really related to the previous point. So if we are reducing the exposure to this contract, then there is a risk that there might be some sort of market power exercise. The trick is to check or to address these kind of concerns before the market opens and have an appropriate level of competition and decrease the concentration of the market. And you can see that again from the same report at the beginning when the market started operating, the concentration index, which usually is measured by so-called HHI index, was relatively high and then went down. So the best approach is actually to address it before the actual market opens. Now to the actual results from our model. So to reiterate what Deb said, we are testing 4 different market design structures. Energy-only market, when we are only trading the energy and reserves are fixed and predefined and allocated to the specific units. Energy-only with ancillary services co-optimization. So at the same time, we are co-optimizing both energy and ancillary services, and units are receiving remuneration for both. Then we have an energy with capacity market. So additional to energy, we have a capacity market that clears annually with the specific level of demand for the firm capacity. And then all together, energy, capacity, and ancillary services optimization. So you see these abbreviations here. I will use them in showing up the results. Now, I thought that nice thing to go through this result is to actually try to answer some of the relevant, often posed questions that we can answer with this kind of models and that we were able to answer with our Georgia analysis, right? So the first question that can pop up in your mind, given the decarbonization focus, is, are resulting market prices sufficient to support VRE investment? And it's not only about the average level of these prices, but also the distribution, right? There will be the VREs, we have some sort of cannibalization effect sometimes, right? The more supply we have of the low-cost VREs of solar and wind, the prices will go down in these hours, which essentially will reduce their revenue margins. And the plot on the left shows the cumulative investment for this case study. So we run it until 2040 with the base year of 2022. So it was over 18 years. And you can see the different types of investments for different technologies, right? For different types of design. And the answer, like the short answer to this question is yes. Well, it can drive the investments in VREs because we can see that investments in wind and solar are the largest ones, right? But we need to add to an extent because these levels, although the highest one in terms of the all investments that we have seen, are still not aligned with the emission targets and the emission reduction targets, right? So they were not producing the levels of emission that we would like to see in order to reach specific decarbonization targets. Another question is how these particular market designs are affecting the conventional or flexible technologies. And here I'm going to focus primarily on the CCGTs, so combined cycle gas turbines, and OCGTs, so open cycle gas turbines, two of which serve a little bit different roles in the system, right? So CCGTs, we can see that actually this is the blue bars. The blue bars. So you can see that they are essentially at the same level, a little bit increased with the capacity market, which and this lack of change indicates that the market is quite saturated for this particular technology and it doesn't really influence it. But in terms of OCGTs, which play a role primarily of providing the reserves, there is a significant change, right? So for the energy-only market, we have investments of just over 100 megawatts. But when we are doing optimization of reserves, so the players are getting the money for providing the reserves as well in a competitive manner, it is almost 200. And when we add the capacity market, it grows up to 400 megawatts, over 400 megawatts of investments. So the kind of outcome of it, or the key information that we have, is that capacity markets are designed to provide additional revenue streams for the firm capacity. But in fact, auxiliary services optimization, apart from all the operational benefits that they bring, they can also provide some additional revenue streams and revenue certainty that will drive this investment into the flexible technologies as well. Not to the extent, at least in Georgia, as the capacity market, but it almost doubled the investment in OCGTs. Now we can ask how the prices are affected. So so you can see here is on the left side the annual average prices for this case. The colors indicate different designs, and dashed and dotted lines show different hydrological scenarios. So the dotted lines in the top, they are showing the low hydro scenario, and the dashed line at the bottom, high hydro scenario. So, well, in terms of the market designs, we can see that there is not much change between energy only and ancillary services optimization, but the capacity market has a downward effect on the average prices, and this effect is greater than the harsher the hydrological conditions are. And we can see also that the hydro conditions in this particular case have a very significant effect on the average prices, increasing them by $10 or $20 per megawatt hour at the end of our horizon. Now we can also think about what happens if we want to align the market or the investments with some environmental targets, right? So classical way of doing this is to impose the emission constraints that from the market perspective. So when we are modeling it, it is really perceived as a trading of the emission permits, right? So we are putting the certain amount of emission permits that is equal to the emission limits that we want to see, and then the players are trading in the resulting prices are really a carbon price, right? So on the right hand side, you can see the investment levels for different market designs, but the two on the left are the original ones that I showed before, and the two on the right are with emission limits. So again, how the carbon prices are affecting the investments? Well, yes, the investments in renewables are growing. Actually, there is a strong preference to the wind power, and a slight decrease in the solar power. So we can see this preference towards this other technology. How the conventional units are affected? Well, there is decrease in all of them. So primarily CCGTs are decreasing, and again, we don't see really much changes between energy only and capacity market. But in terms of OCGT, we can see that even when even when we impose this emission limit at the end of the horizon, so where the level of emissions are actually very low, when we implement ancillary services co-optimization and capacity market, these investments still happen, but this particular technology that provides adequacy, that provides reliability, flexibility, is deriving most of its revenues from, not from energy, but from ancillary services and from capacity market payments. And again, how emissions are affecting the prices? Well, they are affecting them a lot. In terms of the market designs trends, there is not really much difference. Like still, capacity market decreases a little bit the average prices, while co-optimization doesn't have much effect. But in terms of the prices, they are increasing by around $30 to $40 per megawatt hour on average at the end of the horizon, so in 2040. Now, well, you can ask, the Carnot model that we are running is very similar to the capacity expansion models, right? Because we are checking investment, and what that means is that we are not really representing very detailed various types of situations that can occur in power systems, right? We only have a few representative days. This is a typical approach for the planning studies. We have a few representative days that aim to represent the best the load, the variability, or the levels of the different types of renewables, and consequently, these models are not the best to actually evaluate systems reliability under stress conditions, right? But on the other hand, the capacity market and the optimization of reserves is really designed to do that, right? So we have the capacity market because we want to have more firm capacity in the system, and if there are stress conditions, if there is some sort of contingency, we want this new capacity that will be there to provide. And that's why we actually, this particular study, we complemented it with adequacy analysis. You can see that the flow of this analysis was really simple. So we had a optimal capacity expansion results from this game theoretical result that Deb was showing, kind of the results that I was showing you, right? So these results were taken, right? The investments, and then we're simulating for various types of contingencies. And in that case, we simulated mainly for the unit outages, right? So we are, there is certain percentage of chance that particular unit will go out, like a few percent usually, and we're simulating for different types of situation, for different types of VRE availabilities, for different types of load, and running the hourly dispatch model with the unit commitment for these different scenarios. And from that, what we can do is we can calculate what is the actual system adequacy. And we calculate the system adequacy with various types of metrics. In that case, or the most popular is really the loss of load probability, LOLP. And here you can see the results. So, the rows are two scenarios with and without emission limits. Here different rows are the different designs, while the columns show different metrics and different hydro scenarios. So I marked here on red the column that I would like you to focus on. So this is the low hydro scenario. We are evaluating loss of load probability for different types of designs, right? So what you can see first is that energy-only design actually results in extremely high loss of load probability with a lot of energy unserved, which is above any type of metrics or targets that can be applied by the system operator. Which means that when it provides the cheapest prices, maybe not the cheapest prices because capacity market had the cheapest prices, but if we take all the costs together, the energy-only market was actually the cheapest one. But it does, when we are evaluating the system contingency, the adequacy, it's not really performing well. When we are having the ancillary service optimization, well, it performs a little bit better, but still it's nowhere near the targets that the system operators are usually striving for. But when we have a capacity market, so larger level of this that drives the larger level of investments into these flexible technologies, OCTs in our case, it is quite close to the targets which are usually called 1 day in 10 years, at least in US markets. So this is a nice way of actually evaluating what different types of capacity expansion plans that are market-based, that are based only on the profit maximizing decisions, result in terms of adequacy or reliability of the system in this relatively simple setup without additional need for data, because all the data was already there. We just had to run for the different types of scenarios. Now I will move to another case study, but I won't go through all the introduction about the country or so on. I just wanted to show you a few essential results that we had, and this country was Ukraine. And we started working on Ukraine in 2021, which was before the Georgian case study, and it was actually the first country that we analyzed. So Ukraine, when we started working on it, had already electricity market, but it was relatively young, opened only in September 2019. And since the very beginning, it struggled with a lot of regulatory and operational issues, primarily with market power. So right after the opening, there was a lot of market power exercise, and that caused the regulator to impose sudden regulatory adjustments in the market cap prices at a very low level, which are never good for the providing the appropriate signals to the market participants. And let's kind of ask the similar questions as we different questions, but in the similar matter as we had with Georgia, right? So from the decarbonization perspective, that is market level, right? Which with carbon prices, if we have a carbon pricing, how much it would cost to actually decarbonize the system? And the answer for that we had from this particular model, we didn't use anything else, was that, well, Ukraine actually can reach a very substantial decarbonization levels, up to 80% of the current emissions, reduction of the current emissions, while staying below $50 per ton. for carbon, and with only 8 megawatts or $8 per megawatt increase in the average market prices, so much lower than we saw in Georgia. Now, what are the impacts of the alternative environmental policies? So the nice thing about this model is that we really can extend it into different avenues, right? And in that particular case, we analyze different environmental policy that could be imposed. The first one was kind of carbon prices, and in that case, we're able to analyze the performance-based permit trading, which is that the regulator sets the performance of thermal units or carbon emitting units at a specific level in terms of tons of CO2 per megawatt hour of electricity production. And then if you are below this, then you are receiving some sort of subsidy. While you are above that, then you have to pay a penalty. And on the right side, you can see some of the results that we get. So the x-axis actually varies the different types of emission standard from 1 ton per megawatt hour to 0.5 tons per megawatt hour. You can see that how it incentivizes more solar and wind production, as well as cleaner forms of thermal generation, in that case gas, because Ukraine is very coal-dominated market. And it also, we're able to evaluate how this affect the prices. So for example, from the one, which doesn't really affect anyone because all the units were below that, the price increased by just around $3 per megawatt hour. Another interesting question, especially very suitable for Carnot modeling, is how the competition affects the uptake of different types of technologies and the prices. So what we were able to do is we were able to vary the number of VRE investors from 1 to 5 and see how it affects the investor. Because if there is only one investor, then they not only play strategically in the dispatch, so by bidding into the market, in the short-term market, but also, if you have only one potential investor, there is this cannibalization effect. The more they invest, the more they produce, the lower the prices. So they might be reluctant to investing, but if you have more of them, then there is more competition and more investment. And you can see we were able to quantify it. So, with the total investments in wind, PV, and the gas increased from 5.7 gigawatts to 12.6 with 5 equal the same type of investors, and we see the substantial decrease in prices as well, in the magnitude of $20 per megawatt hour. Okay, so towards the end a little bit, but one more case study that I wanted to show you. So, but this one is still work in progress. So for India, we're still working on it, but we are trying to have a very similar setup as for Georgia, with the same tested market designs, with the same tested policies. But of course, India is totally different story in terms of the size of the market. It's a huge market. It's multi-zonal, so there is the states are divided into multiple trading zones and have totally different challenges, right? So we have only few preliminary results from running our game theoretic decarbonization models. And this is familiar because it is very similar to what I showed for Georgia. So the key result first is adding optimization of ancillary services leads to greater development of the flexible technologies. What is a little bit different than from Georgia, which I find really interesting, is that the impact of both co-optimizing ancillary services and capacity market is cumulative. So we see that for energy-only market, we have very low investment in gas turbines, which is this darker color here. With ancillary services co-optimization, it grows up by around 40 gigawatts to 51. With only capacity market, it grows to 59. But with the both of them, this is nearly the accumulation of both, right? And this was not the case in Georgia. In Georgia, when we had the capacity market and we had the ancillary services, there was probably saturation of the market, so there was not much new investments. And the key results too is that, again, okay, we can see that there's like 360 or something gigawatts of solar investments which may seem a lot, but for the India decarbonization pathways, it's not really sufficient. So again, we had a problem on, that we had to somehow align this with the decarbonization policies. And for the India, we had a little bit different approach than for other countries, which is that we understood that a lot of this solar and wind will be out of the market. So they will be just subsidized by various types of state mechanisms. So we just simulated how the market would react if we have this uptake of non-market based investments. And we can see that this is the original energy only average price curve up to 2035, and this is with these investments. So there is a decrease in the average prices by $12 per megawatt hour when you have this aligned with the decarbonization target investments, and that of course diminishes the profits of the participants, right? So it doesn't matter if the investment is out of the market, but it matters if there are some sort of type of technologies that should be driven by the market forces, and their profitability deteriorates. And for many of, for example, CCGTs here, profitability is already low, and it's even lower when we have this decarbonization, this uptake of renewables. All right, so the last two slides that summarizes a little bit this discussion. So I wanted to kind of focus on the methodology, so on what Deb was really saying. And when we started this work 3 years ago, the literature was there, but it was evolving very quickly. And when we committed this kind of literature review, when we discussed these different approaches that Deb said, so status quo, a little bit of adjustments, complete redesign, we see that since then the body of literature really significantly expanded, but a lot of proposals are still quite conceptual. So they're not much supported by various types of models or empirical results, especially in the developing world. And not even that, but even the methodologies on how one could, if someone proposes some sort of design or approach, how to model it, how to design the methodology to evaluate whether it makes sense is unclear. And the application, there are some novel techniques that came out in academia, but the application of these techniques in the developing world context is nearly non-existent, and all it focuses on is on US, Australia, or European markets. And we really believe that the application of these models is really essential, or not maybe these models only, but any models to answer this question is really essential, because the answer will be very different from one country to another, as we saw with Georgia, with Ukraine, with India, right? The markets are different, they operate in the different systems with some policies, contexts, current energy mixes, political dynamics, and regulation. All right, so the model may not be able to capture all of that, but it's able to capture at least the most essential elements. And we believe that this market design laboratory that we created here is really showing the advantage of answering some of these questions and providing this empirical support for extremely important conceptual discussions, and answer some of the questions, including the big ones. I mean, our first work on this topic asked this kind of very big question. And I'm not sure that we really answered directly this one, but at least we provided some sort of guidance on how we can do it. So the question was, could better design and electricity markets help drive decarbonization? And with my last slide, I just wanted to kind of provide you a little bit of motivation. So I showed some sort of analytical results, but and we posed the question, we posed the question, and then we answered them with some sort of results that or the models that we had. But there are actually a lot of questions that were already out there when we started to work on that, where our models were able to support. For example, the first one that was asking Georgia by the system operator, well, is there a risk of inadequacy with energy only market? And yeah, we saw with our model that I presented, yes, the loss of load probability was very high under this particular design. There is a need for additional revenue streams. Another one asking Georgia that was asked by Ministry of Finance, and this is the study that I haven't presented yet to you. was what are the factors that are affecting fiscal status of the market operator when the market opens, right? And we're able to use the same models, the Carnot market models, to answer yes, the gas prices and the hydro availability. Actually, if you're not as they should be, they could put the financial stability of the market operator into jeopardy. Asked in Ukraine, and it was actually asked by the international observers when they were watching what's going on in Ukraine after the market opening, so in 2019 and 2020, or is there an exercise of the market power? And we ran our Carnot models and the least cost models, and so yes, the least cost prices are actually $11 per megawatt lower, not higher. The least cost prices are higher, than it would be even bigger problem, but yeah, they were lower by around $11 per megawatt hour. Another question that was asked by our colleagues in the World Bank, as Deb mentioned, we started working on that because our colleagues were supporting the development of the new storage project, and it was they were asking, well, how it will actually affect, because it was aiming to support the ancillary services market, how it will affect the ancillary services market. And the question and the answer to that was, well, around 35% of the price decrease for some of the products with the 1000 megawatt unit. And in India, finally, asked by Central Electricity Regulatory Commission, what are the impacts of the market coupling that is currently under discussion? And we had some analytical work that shows that, well, it will produce lower prices, lower volatility, and at the same time higher liquidity for the wholesale market. I see I'm a little bit over time, but thank you very much for listening. Happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thanks so much, Adam, and thanks also to Deb. Yeah, excellent presentations, and I think we've already had quite a few questions in the question and answer box. So I think people are really interested in this discussion. I would now encourage people to raise their hands if they would like to ask a question and make use of this half an hour that we have to really have a discussion with the panelists. So yeah, if you do have any questions or comments that have come off the back of that, please do raise your hand and we will come to you. In the meantime, while people are thinking of their questions, I think let's have a look at some of these written questions that were interesting. And thanks a lot, Deb. You've answered most of them already, but let's have a look at this question on whether weather changes are kind of included in the model. Are you able to simulate weather changes? Deb, I know you've already answered, but maybe for the benefit of the group, it would be useful to also say it.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I think that in that you mean the weather changes impact on the demand, right? That's what I saw. Demand profile due to weather changes are simulated. Well, they could be simulated. I think that the advantage of these models that we are showing right now, that they are very similar to the traditional dispatch model, traditional capacity expansion models, and these models are perfectly capable of linking the weather, any other factors that you may think of with the demand, with the prices, with the costs, with any performance of the technologies, and we can do it with these models as well, but focus on the market. So the answer is we didn't do it. For our case studies, for Georgia, we had a variation in the hydrological availability, so it was in a sense the stochastic program really, but we can do it definitely, and it's relatively straightforward to implement.
Excellent. Thank you, Adam. Well, we're actually getting quite a few questions now in the question and answer boxes, so there's a few now unanswered. We have this question from Sushil. Please, can you share your views on multi-part tariff for renewables instead of single part in the case of a deep decarbonisation scenario?
And if you like, I can try to answer. Yes, I think in terms of the multi-part tariff of RE, which means this will be more like having a sort of a capacity and energy related charges paid to RE. We effectively model that in the versions that include a capacity market. So that's where RE as well as non-RE can actually bid into the market for both capacity and energy. We do see still, like a lot of RE entry for the case studies that we have looked at for Ukraine and Georgia. And with the sort of thermal options naturally being limited, for example, in Ukraine, we are not assuming any more coal build and so on. RE does come in, and that sort of opens up the possibility of a multi-part tariff to be introduced through a sort of a capacity market. Now, I think, that's where the debate has always been on how firm the RE capacity is, and hence what capacity price should reasonably be paid to those type of variable renewable energy producers. So that, I think that debate still remains open, and whether multi-part tariff is necessarily the way to go, we don't know, but at least there is a market mechanism, and so far the results are supporting that the RE can still come in. Thanks.
Thank you. Sorry, I've lost control of my mouse there. So we've had some more questions in the question and answer box. We have a question from Rashmi. That's the Indian regulator. Rashmi, I'm wondering, would you like to raise your hand and ask your question directly? I think it would be nice also to speak directly. Yes, Rashmi.
Yeah, am I audible?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, the only point was this was with respect to, I think, Ukraine and Georgia, which I again repeated in my question box. You say there is a risk of market opening due to gas prices, that I understand, but I don't understand how hydro availability will lead to a jeopardy in financial stability. Maybe my question is very basic, and there may be others who may know the answer, but I was not able to comprehend this part. Thanks.
Deb, would you like me to take it?
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
Yes, so that's actually a very good question, and it's I think this was a result that was very specific for Georgia, and this was related to, and this is still related because the market is not yet open as I recall, about the process, the transfer process from the regulated long-term contracts towards the market exposure. So the plan was that these PSOs, public service obligations, would be transformed into various types of contracts, for example, CFDs. But always the question, and it's question in Europe right now, it's questioning in other parts of the world, who's the off-taker of these contracts, right? Because someone has to be a guarantee for these contracts, and these levels for these contracts for this CFD would have a very similar levels than this long-term contract beforehand. So they are not competitively, auctioned contracts. But rather the lucrative contract that they had before. So the idea in Georgia was that the market operator would be the off-taker. And because of that, when the prices at the market, at the spot market vary, because the CFDs, contracts for difference, require these units also to participate in the spot market. As these prices vary, if they are lower or higher, depending on the contract, that means that the market operator will either receive money from them, or will have to pay back, or will have to pay them because the prices will be lower than these contracts for difference, right? So our simulations show that, for example, when the hydro is very high and the prices in the market will be low because of this abundance of hydro, the prices at the spot market would be lower than the strike price for CFDs, and that means that the off-taker of the contract, being the market operator, would have to pay a lot, and that can put them into the financial instability, right? So that was but this is a very specific result for Georgia and their way how they are trying to move from these regulated long-term contracts towards the liberalized market exposure.
Great. Thanks for that, Adam. We have Satyanarayan with a hand up. Please go ahead. Are you able to turn on your mic?
Yeah, am I audible?
Yes. Go
Okay,
ahead.
thank you for the opportunity. So I'm Vishu Vishal from IX. My question is related to the market design in terms of price cap. So as we know that we want to add newer technologies like battery storage, but at the same time, the discussion is how we can protect consumer interest in terms of the prices going, hitting the ceiling during non-solar hours. But having a price cap, what should be the level of price cap so that this battery storage and newer technologies should not adversely affected, and at the same time we should be able to balance the interest of the end consumers in terms of the price not going high because of some marginal stations has a higher cost of generation. So my question is in terms of market design, how we can approach this price cap part and how we can structure the maybe price discovery philosophy or other mechanisms so that we can balance both. That is, we can add battery storage capacity through markets and also at the same time we can protect the end consumer interest.
Who'd like to take that question? Deb?
Let me have a go. I think excellent question. I think the question is actually probably more general than just battery storage. And as I kind of like just briefly alluded to, the setting the price cap is a fine balance if you set it very high and the market happens to be concentrated, or there is at least one dominant generator who can withhold capacity at critical hours, like during a heat wave when wind is very low. And it's, let's say it's evening peak, solar is also low or absent, then the prices can actually go to the price cap almost every single day during that heat wave period. So there's that risk of setting the price cap too high. And then on the other hand, the risk you are identifying is absolutely real as well, that if it's set too low, then it sort of disadvantages peaking storage, especially pumped hydro, battery storage, and so on. And in fact, that's kind of like one issue that we came up in Georgia, because they're thinking of relatively low price cap around $150 per megawatt hour. And mind you, like some of the more advanced markets have price caps in thousands of dollars. So there's a big discrepancy there. So I think that's why this type of analysis will be very useful to understand where you set the price cap, and you can clearly see what kind of flexible resources are being barred because of the price cap, and what it also entails in terms of system reliability. So if you actually have low frequency control ancillary service availability below what is needed, then that system is prone to some sort of outage risk. So if the contingency does happen, then there is not enough frequency control ancillary services to recover frequency to a safe level. So I think it's kind of like it requires some in-depth analysis, but it's entirely possible doing that around one of these models. And the bigger point is that, like it should be done on a scientific basis rather than a political decision. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Deb. And also on the topic of storage, we have a question from Tony in the Costa Rican regulator. Tony, I'll read your message out, but feel free to raise your hand if you would like to come in. So Tony says, in all cases, what have been the main adjustments to regulation? For example, in Costa Rica, generators that install solar or wind plants are not required to include storage as regulation reserves in the investment. It would be a significant cost and would impact the deployment of these investments in renewable energy. Adam or Deb, any response to Tony's question?
Yes, I think again an excellent question. I guess there are two parts to that. Firstly, installing solar or wind with co-located storage is one option, but not the only option. And if the sort of value proposition of that storage is partly to provide storage and also to provide ancillary services, then it could be a sort of a more like a transmission resource, and that's kind of like already we have good examples of that in Australia, California, and so on. And it does sort of impose additional cost, which will ultimately be need to be paid for by the customers. But if we do have a bit more sort of option thrown in the mix, rather than co-locating each individual solar wind to perfectly match storage to provide firm capacity, that's one option, and it may be contractually quite attractive. If the price is right, if investors will do that. But it may also be a more expensive solution to the other paradigm I'm talking about, where the storage is actually provided more centrally at sort of big transmission substations controlled by the system operator. You might actually get a sort of a bigger bang for the bucks under that scenario. But either way, there will be some additional cost that will be paid, that will need to be paid by the customers. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Deb. So we have two questions from Nurin. One is whether the model is open access for academics to use, and the other is whether you've done similar research in Kazakhstan, which makes me think of a wider question, which is, what other case studies have you done or are you planning to do in the future?
Let me take that, but Adam, please also chime in if I say the wrong thing. First of all, on Kazakhstan, we have not done this type of modeling for Kazakhstan, but we have done quite a bit of analysis on the planning front, and so has NREL and other places. But I guess, like with Kazakhstan, with its sort of dominance of coal, integration of VRE, and the presence of a market, that may actually benefit from another look. I think it probably makes an excellent case study that, I would personally be quite interested to either make the model available and work with the country team there, or this is the bank where if we get an official request, we can also initiate one of these studies. In terms of whether the model is open access for academicians to use, it's coded in GAM, so in that sense, it's not like a completely open access in terms of the language, because the user needs to actually have GAMs. But other than that, I guess we would welcome sort of people to actually give it a try. Mind you that this is not a shrink wrap software, so you have to probably reach out to Adam a lot to get to use it. We are kind of in fact, trying to get some more users within the bank to do that. You're more than welcome to join that group and use it.
Yeah, and let me emphasize that. If there are any stakeholders out there, academics or people working in the system operators or whenever, that are interested in these models, we publish a couple of papers that kind of show the methodology behind it. But I'm more than happy to share the code, to show you how to implement it, answer any questions, and then just to maybe even chat on what are the possible other applications of these or other models. So feel free to shoot us an email, and I'm pretty sure that we'll be happy to collaborate.
Excellent. Thank you very much. We have one more question in the question and answer box. So please, can you share your views on liquidity in the Indian ancillary service market? Is there a need to improve the design?
Deb, I will leave it maybe to you.
Yeah. I'm kind of I don't know where to start. What ancillary services market and hence what liquidity. But then, it's we have participants from Grid India, and also Mr. Suni, who is the founding CEO of Pusoko. I would welcome their views on it. But in terms of like how I see it, I think the ancillary services market has been proposed, including the co-optimization, but it has not been implemented yet. There are sort of, I would say, call it sort of semi-market mechanisms that are used by the system operator to dispatch ancillary services, but that's for a subset of the generators. So in short, there's plenty of room to improve the design. The ideal would be to actually integrate it into the market, or if that market pan-India is not happening, like the market-based economic dispatch, which is a sort of a gross pool that was proposed, together with co-optimization ancillary services, if that's not happening for a few years, the ancillary services requirement is happening on a minute-by-minute basis. So it's better to put something in place, even if it is not the perfect design. And that design could be to actually integrate it into the security constraint economic dispatch, which is already in place in the National Load Dispatch Center, but it could be expanded to the states, and there are some efforts already underway on that. So if we actually have a SCAD engine which optimizes ancillary services, it's, like at least in terms of implementation, it's relatively straightforward at a technical level. But then I think it will give you sort of the shadow prices for ancillary services. So it will actually be an excellent way to start, relatively easy to implement, and then it will provide you sort of a lot of insights into what ancillary services prices might look like when there is a sort of a formal market in place. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Deb. I think, Anna, I was about to say that we finished with the questions, but I've just seen a few more come up here. Okay, yeah, sharing emails, we can do that afterwards. So Tony, again from the Costa Rican regulator, is asking how Costa Rica can be a case study for this. So I think you already said that the bank would be open to formal requests, right? But how does that work in practice?
Sorry, Adam, do you want to have a go at that, or do you want me to?
I mean, I think that in terms of the running, like having a modeling case study on the electricity markets with already 100% renewable electricity in the mix would be extremely interesting modeling case study. But whether the markets or our cases are more based on driving the decarbonization, so leading to this 100% or high percentage of renewables with different types of market mechanisms, question of whether it's actually needed for Costa Rica. But in terms of the collaboration, then I think that Deb is probably a little bit better positioned on how to initiate this kind of case study. Deb?
Yeah, no, I think as I mentioned before, I think we are will be very interested to actually develop more case studies and see whether these sort of models can at least partially answer some of these questions. Costa Rica would, for sure, like with its sort of 100% renewable, and it's also in a region where we have not done any case study at all so far. So you are welcome to actually come up with a request and then see whether we can actually make something happen.
Thank you both for that. And then we have a question from Francesco in the Italian regulator, who's asking about the differences between your model and the model used by ENTSO-E in the EU, whether you're aware of that model and looking at the differences there. Would you have any comments related to that?
Yeah, I can take this one. So I'm aware of this model, never actually kind of played with it in any way, but I'm aware, but this is really a resource adequacy model. So the core model that we presented is based on the perspective of the participants in the electricity market, individual entities that either bid or invest in order to reach some objective, primarily the maximize their profit, right? So it is similar, or this is kind of connected a little bit to the least cost dispatch or least cost in capacity expansion, but it's a little bit different thing. while the model that is used by European Resource Adequacy in the European Resource Adequacy Assessment by NCAO is a pure unit commitment economic dispatch model. This is similar, so they're using the model that is similar to this auxiliary model that I talked about when I was talking about Georgia. So for Georgia, we had this market-led capacity expansion, and then we wanted to see what is the adequacy, right? So then we ran the dispatch model that were able to answer some of this adequacy question about the loss of load probability. This particular model was kind of similar to what NCO is probably using for the European adequacy studies. Similar, but I'm pretty sure that NCO is using extremely elaborative models, so our are probably a little different weight type. But in terms of the game theoretic models, they are similar but a little bit different with different purpose. So the differences are quite substantial.
Yeah, and if I could add to that, Andy, is it okay if I come in and take also the next question?
Go ahead, then. Yes, a very wide-ranging question. Go ahead, then.
Yeah, so I think with the European Resource Adequacy Assessment model, it's actually relatively simple, and it has to be simple given the way the organization is structured with so many countries. So there are like some serious sort of data issues and so on. But as Adam already explained, it sort of sits as a complement to the type of market analysis model that we are using rather than substitute. So as we have also done, like with Georgia, we have run sort of Monte Carlo simulation to test the performance. So with European markets, you would actually use the resource adequacy assessment model that's already out there. Where actually the market modeling that we have done will fit in better is the cost-benefit analysis framework used for evaluating interconnectors. Now with the CBA, the cost-benefit assessment framework that NSOE is using, they have deliberately kept out any market power type analysis given the complexity of those analyses. The only country where this is kind of used quite explicitly is Australia. So where the market benefit of an interconnector, which is of course within Australia, it's assessed. To me, it's actually a pretty significant issue because if one country is seeing very high prices, which can very well happen, especially as the NSOE membership extends to like the smaller countries which concentrate in markets like Ukraine, then I think the interconnector can be a huge plus, and which is kind of like getting into the second question from Mr. Suni on cross-border market. So if we, for example, have a very high price even on the Indian side, or let's say it's in NSOE with one of the East European countries, facing hundreds of dollars per megawatt hour persistent price, and it may be because of market power, then the interconnector actually not only reduces fuel cost, improve reliability, all the traditional components of benefit, but it also reduces market power. It's kind of a, like it's almost a threat to anybody who is trying to bid very high during high demand period. So that's where I think it fits more naturally in, and I think this will be something that should also be introduced in the South Asian market, so that the interconnectors, when we are proposing sort of a business case for it, so it has all the usual component of the interconnector, reducing fuel cost, improving reliability, but also it should actually show that it will actually reduce exercise of market power and hence reduce the price volatility probably in both markets. So that's why I think this particular modeling sort of fits in.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Deb. And it also gives me an opportunity to say that there's another project that we're working on in RETA is on interconnection and energy regulators' roles in interconnection, and it's something we're working on together with the International Energy Agency, IRENA, as well as the World Bank. So yeah, please do kind of follow our work on that project too. I think with that we've reached the end of our time. I want to say a big thanks first of all to our presenters, Deb and Adam, for your really insightful presentations. I think they gave us a really good overview of the key findings that you've had so far, but also showing there's a lot of deeper knowledge out there that we can tap into. And quite a few people asked questions about the materials, the slides, and the case studies. We will be sending around the materials to everybody who signed up to the webinar. We'll also be making them available on the Knowledge Hub. So thank you to Adam and Deb, but just as importantly, thank you to all of you for joining the webinar, for listening, for thinking about this important topic, and for engaging in the discussion with all of your questions. Like I said at the beginning, we'll use your feedback that we've got here through those questions today for future work, as well as any feedback we receive afterwards through the Retta Knowledge Hub or through the survey. And Naoki has posted the link to the survey in the chat, so please do fill that in for us. If there are any regulators who've joined the webinar today and you're not yet signed up to Retta, please do get in touch. We have 60 energy regulators from all around the world signed up to Retta, but I've seen that we've had a few regulators join today who aren't yet signed up, so please get in touch. It's free and easy to join. Just contact us by email. I think Naoki's putting the email in the chat too. So we'll be in touch for future webinars on this work stream on market design and carbon pricing. Thanks again, everybody, for joining, and enjoy the rest of your day. Or for those of you further east, have a good night's sleep, and thank you very much. Goodbye.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.